All right, let's get started. Welcome and thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar. And happy summer solstice. It's the longest day of sunshine today. If you didn't know that, I wouldn't blame you. There's certainly a lot going on, but we're really excited. We got a really exciting topic here, home energy resilience with solar plus storage. And happy late Juneteenth, which was yesterday. My name is Zach Snyder. I'm program manager at Solar Oregon. And today we are going to be taking a look. This is for all of you who are interested in solar plus storage for its energy resilience aspects for your home. So this is residential solar plus storage. And it's a really exciting topic. It's more and more important increasingly over the past year and past few months. And so we've got a little bit to unpack here. We're going to get started by taking a look at what is energy resilience. If you haven't heard of the term, we're going to just kick that around for a little bit. We're going to talk about then how resilience is created with solar plus storage. Then we're going to take a look at the nuts and bolts of storage. So what is it actually like to have a battery, a home battery, and what are some different aspects when you're thinking about installing one in your home? We're going to take a look at the incentives and the installation process. And then we have a treat. We're going to hear from Patrick Gibson, who is a homeowner who has solar plus storage. And he's a long part of the Solar Oregon community, and really excited to have him on here today. And we are going to wrap up with some Q&A. A quick thank you to the sponsor of today's event and our partner for a lot of the programs that we produce at Solar Oregon, the Energy Trust of Oregon. They're an independent nonprofit. They help to provide access to affordable energy and energy efficiency. And they're a provider of some really great incentives for solar. So thank you to Energy Trust of Oregon. And I want to get started by telling you a little bit about Solar Oregon and what we do. We are a nonprofit. We're based out of Portland, Oregon. We've been around for over 40 years. We just had our 40th birthday bash this past December, which was a lot of fun. We educate about clean energy. We educate about solar in particular, but also other forms of clean energy. For example, heat pump water heaters and electric vehicles at times, because all of these technologies are interrelated and connected. We do a lot of outreach, we do a lot of community building and some advocacy. And here's just a taste of a few of the programs that we have. Our Basics of Solar, which is not this event. We're here to learn about solar plus storage today. And if anybody wants more information about solar, come check out our next Basics of Solar webinar. We also do solar tours, including a solar winery tour, which is this picture that you see here from this past year. A really great event, and it's been postponed. It was going to be in May. It's now going to be in August. Even though everything has changed with COVID, we can't have a big in-person tour altogether, we're going to have an exciting tour still with virtual option. We also focus a lot on peer-to-peer education. And so we love telling stories about clean energy. I've been with Solar Oregon since this past July officially, but I was part of the community before that, and just love the work that Solar Oregon does. We're a member-based organization, and our programs are made possible and really driven by our members and the support of our members. It costs $40 for a year-long membership. You get benefits and access to events, and you get to be part of a clean energy community. Thank you to our members who are joining us today. And if you're not a member, please consider becoming a Solar Oregon member. It's a great way to support us and support our educational programming. I am joined by one of our board members and other panelists today, Lucas Miller, who's going to be monitoring the chat, and he will drop a link in the chat that will direct you to be able to sign up for membership if you want. Before we get started, just a couple quick notes. We are using the Zoom webinar platform. We've all become much more familiar with these platforms and technologies, and we've had to since COVID has started. But just a little orientation. We try to make this a really interactive experience, and so we have a few tools at our disposal. One is the Q&A button. So if you see this button that says Q&A, you click that. You can type in your questions, and Lucas will be monitoring the Q&A. And you can type in your question anytime during the webinar, and we will be answering that at the end during the Q&A section. Another thing for you to use is the chat. And so if you open up the chat window, this is a way for you to just make a comment. I wouldn't ask questions in the chat window, ask those in the Q&A window, just to make sure that we are keeping track of them and answering them. But the chat will be dropping links in there, and it's a good way just if you want to connect with everybody else who is viewing the webinar right now. And the final tool that we have to make this interactive, which is my personal favorite, is polling. And so I will be asking just a few questions today to all of you, and you'll see a window when I do that opens up that looks a little bit like this. It'll have the question here. This is just an example, and your possible answers. So you click on your answer and you hit submit. It's fun. We get to learn about each other, and I'll be able to share those results with everybody else. And so let's go ahead and do our first poll just to get the wheels greased. And our first one, we've had a lot of these webinars, and I always love to learn where folks are joining from. It gives us good insight into the communities that we're serving. And it's just kind of interesting to see where people are tuning in from. So I'm going to launch our first poll. And you should see this window now. Go ahead and click with your answer. And once everybody has voted, I will go ahead and share the results, and we can all take a look. All right, it looks like we've got maybe just a couple more. I'll give you just a few more seconds. All right, let's go ahead and take a look. It looks like the majority of people, just about half of people, are tuning in from the Portland metro area. Some southern Oregon and Oregon coast, Willamette Valley, one person from Washington, and some folks from out of the region, which is great. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. All right, so with our tools under our belt, let's go ahead and jump into our first topic, which is energy resilience. And what is energy resilience? Well, um, energy resilience is the ability to withstand disruptions to the energy system that you use. And this picture kind of sums it up right here. This, if you can't tell, is an outage. This is a city landscape just right around dusk, and you can see there's been a power outage, and you can see one building with its lights on, and um, this building, has a system that allows it to be energy resilient. Energy resilience is the ability to use energy, in particular, the way we're talking about it today, when the grid is down. And just to take a step back, because I don't think this is something that we all think about necessarily in our day to day, but the energy grid that we are a part of is a whole system. It has different components. You might not think of the energy that you're using all the time when you turn on the lights and all the systems that are necessary to make that happen and bring energy into your home or wherever you are. And so this is, I know this diagram, hopefully it's not too complex. Don't let your eyes glaze over. But this is a very simplified diagram that shows you some basic systems that are part of the grid generally. Of course, the grid is a large and complex system that has different components, but this is kind of a linear transection of it. You can think of energy being produced at a central power plant. More often than not, it is. And that energy is harnessed in the form of electricity and sent first through a transmission system, which is a high voltage way to get it long distance from the power plant more towards a population center. And once it reaches the population center, the utility needs to step that down into a lower voltage. And so they have a unit called a substation, which performs that function. And beyond the substation, it still needs to get to the individual customers. And so you have the distribution system, which is a lower voltage transmission system, and it eventually gets to the end user. And the reason I'm showing you this diagram is to show you that this system you can think of kind of like the links in a chain. And the issue is that if one of these links breaks, it can have an effect that translates down the rest of the links in the chain. And the more links there are, obviously, the more potential places there are for that to happen. Of course, I think a lot of us are used to really reliable energy availability and service. And so this may or may not happen all the time. And that's actually one of my polling questions. So get ready for our next poll. I'm wondering how many of you have had a power outage in the last year? So go ahead and take just a minute to answer this poll. All right, we've got about 90%, 92%. I'm going to go ahead and give us 10 more seconds, and then I'll exit the poll. All right. And of course, this is just the this is not an official study of energy resilience needs. This is just the folks who are tuning in today. But it looks like power outages, some of us have had really reliable energy service over the past year. A number of us have had an outage in the past year. It may not be something that is, it may or may not be something that is hugely important to you that you think about on the day to day, but just interesting to think about how much you think about energy and its reliability and energy resilience. So when we're thinking about energy resilience, um, the vast majority of outages in utility lines, if you look statistically, are caused by storms and small mammals like squirrels. That's most likely the outage that you've had in the past year if you have had one. And those are pretty much a static background, statistical occurrence. They're going to happen at a certain rate, and they just do happen. But there's a few other aspects, a few other things that can cause disruptions to the grid that are worth taking a look at, and that have become more important and more relevant, especially recently. One of them is public safety power shutoffs. And if you followed the news last year, you may have seen stories about PG and E, so that's the utility down in California, no relation to our local utility here. They service a large part of California, and they began to shut down portions of their grid prophylactically in order to prevent wildfires, because wildfires have been sparked by utility transmission and distribution lines. And the Paradise Fire in California is one example of that. And this is something that was very disruptive to a lot of folks. A lot of folks lost access to their electricity in order to prevent these wildfires. And this public safety power shutoff, although maybe the most noteworthy event in recent memory was down in California, they are thought to be more common. And in fact, utility up in Hood River County has indicated that they are going to start, as of this month actually, I believe, public safety power shutoffs in Hood River County in order to prevent wildfires there. It's something that may grow as a source of grid disruption. And partially that is forced by climate change, as climate change makes forest fires more likely. Another grid disruption to keep in mind is cyber attack. And this is something that is registered as a priority for the Oregon Department of Energy, because when you have centralized power production, it makes it easy. You have all of your eggs in one basket. It makes it easy to disrupt the grid intentionally if you're a bad actor. Hopefully that won't happen, but that is something that is actively registered as a threat to grid security. And the last one that I want to talk about briefly is Cascadia seismic hazard. Here in Oregon, we're sitting on a big subduction zone, and we know that there have been large, on the order of 9.0 magnitude earthquakes on this subduction zone periodically for thousands of years, and that we are in a period of time where we're expecting another large earthquake. And this is, one of the largest kind of central features of energy resilience conversation in Oregon, because there's so much risk here. And this on the left, both of these, this figure and this table are from the a 2013 report to the Oregon legislature called the Oregon Resilience Plan. And this hazard still exists, so it's a little bit an outdated report, but it's still there. And the map just shows you, how much relative damage there will be in color bands. So the most on the coast, a little bit less in the valley, and a little bit less in eastern Oregon. But the thing I want to point out here is that it's thought, and you can see on the table on the right, that electricity service on the coast may be disrupted from 3 to 6 months. And in the valley, which if you look at the map, that's everywhere in yellow there, it may be disrupted from 1 to 3 months. And so that's a huge grid disruption when that happens. It's not a matter of if, but when. And this brings us to solar plus storage. In response to that initial report in 2013, and as the conversation has evolved in Oregon around energy resilience, solar plus storage has been identified as a key energy resilience strategy. And I just want to show you a few examples. This image on the left is the cover of a guidebook for local energy resilience for small and medium electric utilities. This was produced by the Oregon Department of Energy in 2019, and they suggest solar plus storage as a mechanism for creating energy resilience across the state. The central image is the Portland Firehouse #1 in downtown Portland, where they recently installed a microgrid of solar plus storage. And that will give them great energy resilience benefits. And on the right is a recently completed microgrid. You see the batteries there at Howard Elementary for the utility down in the Eugene area. And that will make Howard Elementary School a source for community energy resilience. And so this is why we're here today, to think about solar plus storage from the aspect of energy resilience. So please submit your questions in the Q&A. We love the questions. We are going to hold them till the end. And right now I'm going to jump into how does solar plus storage create energy resilience? So what is solar plus storage? First off, it's the combination of solar, photovoltaic, so that these are solar panels that convert sunlight into electricity. And here we're talking about residential solar. So this might be something you put on the roof of a house, might be something that if you have enough land, you could install a ground mount on your property. And you're combining that with a home battery, like the one depicted on the right. And that battery can take in energy and it can release it then for you to use. So before we take a look at how solar plus storage creates energy resilience, let's first take a look at how solar works. So you can see the sunlight hits the PV panel, the solar panel, that produces electricity. And if you're not super technical, feel free to glaze over any of these details, but it produces DC electricity. And if we reach back to maybe 3rd grade, 5th grade science class, we remember learning about direct current versus alternating current. Don't worry if that's not coming to you right now. There is a special box called the inverter, or sometimes there are multiple microinverters, one for each panel or one for every other panel, that convert the electricity from DC to AC. And then it goes to the house, gets wired into the electrical panel, and goes to all of your circuits. It can help power your lights, your appliances, and also can flow out from your electrical panel to the utility grid through a bidirectional utility meter. And solar, we know that sun shines during the day, does not shine quite as much at night. And in order to get a benefit, be able to use your electricity whenever you need it, regardless of whether the sun is shining, we have a system called net metering. And this is basically, it allows you to take in electricity from the grid when you're not producing as much as you need on your own with your solar. And then when you're producing more solar electricity than you need, you can send that back out on the grid and receive a credit for it. So this is just an example. In the Pacific Northwest here, we tend to have sunnier summer months and less sunny winter months. And during the summer months, you see the orange bar is how much electricity you're producing. The blue bar is how much you're consuming over the course of the month. And here in the summer month, we might have an excess, so we're gaining credit. In the winter month, we might be producing less than we're using, and so we would use up those net metering credits. And the reason I'm telling you why solar works is because solar in itself, without a battery, doesn't give you energy resilience. It doesn't allow you to use electricity when the grid is down. And that is because it's for a very specific reason. It has to do with safety of utility workers. So let me explain. Here, you can see the grid. You know, it acts kind of like a battery, right? You can put electricity into it, and you can take some out. Obviously, it's not a battery, but you can think of it like one. And when the grid goes down, your solar panels can technically still produce electricity, and they are producing that DC voltage. But if you were to send that electricity back out on the grid, and say you have a neighborhood where a dozen or so people have solar, that will send a significant amount of voltage onto the grid and could injure utility workers as they're working to repair the grid. And so for that reason, it's electrical code that your solar panels need to shut down when the grid is down, which means you cannot use the electricity from your solar panels when the grid is down. So no grid, no solar, no energy resilience per se. But when you add a battery, a home battery, into your system, when the grid goes down, you still disconnect from the grid. That's still the energy code, but the battery allows you to store the electricity from your solar panels and then use it when you need it. And this creates a self-sustaining system where when the grid is down, your solar is producing electricity, it's sending it into the battery or into your home if you're using electricity. And the solar panels can recharge the battery over time. Batteries by themselves produce energy resilience, but adding solar is like adding a supercharger to that because you're able to recharge your battery while the grid is down. And when you island from the grid, that allows you to use electricity when the greater grid is down. So here are some aspects of storage that are good to think about if you're considering storage for your home. And I'd like to share a poll just to get a sense for why folks are here. What is your experience with solar and or battery storage? I'm curious why you're here today. Maybe you already have solar and storage. Maybe you either have solar or storage and you're interested in adding the other. Maybe you don't have either, but you're considering solar and or storage. You may be aware of solar and or storage, but you're here for more information. Or you're completely unaware and you're here to learn, which is great, and I always love that. Or maybe somewhere in between and you're not sure. So go ahead and take a minute and we can share this poll. I will get a drink of water. We're at 93%. I'll give just a few more seconds. Great. Great. So it sounds like most of us today either have solar or storage and are interested in learning about the other. A number of folks don't have either. Great. Thank you. So here are here's what you're probably going to be introduced to as you explore storage for your home. Of course, there are different options when it comes to batteries, and that's the first thing to think of. You have to select what kind of technology you want. All of these products are great. All of them, we are brand neutral, and we don't support one product over another at Solar Oregon. But here are 4 that are common in the Oregon market. And they all have slightly different characteristics. And really the best way to evaluate what product is right for you is to talk to a contractor. And I'll have more information about finding a good contractor later on in the presentation. So when you decide to add storage, whether or not you have solar or you're going to have solar in the future, you're going to either back up part of your home, it's called a partial backup, or you're going to back up your whole home and all the circuits in it, and that's called a whole home backup. And a whole home backup, you may need multiple batteries. You might need 2, 3, sometimes even 4. It will depend on how much solar insulation, how much solar energy resource you have, and are taking advantage of. And it will also depend on how much electricity you use. If you have a bunch of old appliances that are not very efficient, and you have a big old hot tub that you're heating in the backyard, and an air conditioner that you run on high a lot during the summer, that will, of course, require more than if you have a bunch of really efficient appliances and generally a smaller electrical load. That's for whole home backup. For a partial backup, if you have one battery, you're most likely going to be able to back up part of the circuits in your home, which can be a great benefit, even though you won't necessarily be able to have the second TV on during an outage too. Partial backup gives you great energy resilience for your core essentials. So a couple of questions that you will be asked, most likely by your contractor, when you take a look at storage for your home are what needs power and for how long. Some common things to back up are a refrigerator to keep food fresh, some lights in essential parts of the home, and maybe a circuit and a couple of outlets where you generally charge a computer. Things for communication like that. You typically won't, if you're doing a partial backup, you have the freedom to choose what you want to, though these core essentials are typically more important to folks than doing a partial backup of a TV, and so you have to pick and choose. For how long, you may be able to get a longer amount of, it's called period of autonomy of energy. That's how long you will have energy after the grid goes down with your battery and with your solar plus storage if you have solar. And you may be able to increase your period of autonomy if you decrease the number of circuits that you choose to back up. And so this obviously involves a lot of calculation. It involves a little bit of sitting down and thinking. And this is something that a contractor will work with you to figure out the answers to all these questions. When you choose what loads you want to back up, what they install is an essential loads panel. So this is a separate electrical panel with its own circuit breakers, and your contractor will move the circuit breakers that you want to back up from your main circuit panel into this essential loads panel. And only these circuits will be powered by your battery. Again, this is only for partial home backup. If you're doing a whole home backup, you won't need to pick and choose like this. So this is great. I see we've got some Q&A questions, and I'm excited to get to them. We've got one more section before we get to Patrick's story, and then we'll be at the Q&A after that. So now let's just quickly talk a little bit about the incentives and the installation process. And there are some great incentives to take advantage of if you're interested in solar plus storage. Here are three main ones in Oregon. From left to right, we've got the investment tax credit. This is a federal tax credit. And you will get this money back when you file your taxes if you have tax liability, and it's a sizable amount. Right now it's at 26%. We also have a state rebate called the Solar Plus Storage Rebate, which just came online in 2019. It's very exciting. And it has at times run out of money, and then the pot is either refilled or there's a little bit of conversation there. Check with your contractor, and they'll know if you'll be have access to the Solar Plus Storage rebate. I believe that right now there are two pots of money with the Solar Plus Storage rebate. There's the standard rebate, and there's also a special pot of money for low and moderate income, which is a great resource to be able to take advantage of. And you can find whether you qualify through your contractor. They can let you know. And I believe that low and middle income resources are being prioritized for that rebate right now, especially during COVID. And finally, and certainly not least of all, Energy Trust of Oregon. They provide great solar incentive. Take a look at the numbers on here. Again, that's 26% for investment tax credit, up to $5,000 for low middle income solar plus storage rebate, and a good chunk from the Energy Trust of Oregon standard solar incentive. The investment tax credit and the solar plus storage rebate both apply to solar and storage if your storage is powered by solar. And so check with your contractor. They can help you navigate all of these incentives. One last one I want to mention is solar within reach. And this is a really exciting new offering from Energy Trust of Oregon. It's much like their other incentive. It's based on the size of the solar system. This is specifically for solar and not for storage, but it's $1.50 per watt, up to $9,000 per home. This is for low and middle income, and for example, a family of four earning less than or equal to $77,520 would qualify for this. And so this can be a huge, great resource if you're considering solar. A couple of notes here. In terms of finding a contractor, Energy Trust of Oregon They certify contractors as their trade allies. These are rigorously qualified and vetted contractors. They're the only ones who are qualified to get you the Energy Trust of Oregon incentives. So if you need those incentives, you'll have to go through a trade ally. And if you're looking for a trade ally, we have Energy Trust of Oregon has a great tool. And Lucas, I'll ask you to drop this other link in the chat. They have an online tool for requesting a solar bid. It's a very easy tool. Fill in some of your information about what you're looking for, and they will randomly select a few top-rated contractors for you. And those contractors will then contact you to schedule a quote, a consultation. And that is what we've got for energy resilience with solar plus storage, and how it works. I hope that this has answered a lot of your questions. And now we've got a really special treat. Patrick Gibson, I am going to stop sharing my screen if you are ready, and we can hear from Patrick. He's got a great solar plus storage story.
Yes, I am sharing my screen right now. All right, can you guys see everything? Zach, everybody can see?
Yeah, it looks great.
Okay, cool. Hi, everybody. My name is Patrick Gibson. I was asked to kind of share a personal experience with solar and resilience. So join me on our renewable adventure. So just a little personal background. I grew up on the East Coast, the Midwest, and Hawaii, but I've lived here in Portland for about 21 years. I have a BS in computer engineering from Purdue University, and I'm currently a principal engineer architect at Mentor, a Siemens business. So independence destiny. So I've always been kind of a technical person. I really enjoy all forms of technology. When I moved to Oregon, met my wonderful partner, Emily, but she kind of introduced me to kind of environmental issues, and I started getting very excited about it and involved. The first thing, and so we've evolved from transportation, some monitoring. We've taken a number of steps over the years, but we eventually ended up with solar and battery. So we are a solar and resilience home. So I'll kind of take you through our journey. Oops. So it all started in shortly after we were married. My wife decided that she wanted a Toyota Prius. Didn't really know much about hybrids back in 2004. But this is kind of, we've all become familiar with this screen. You know, Toyota Priuses are fairly ubiquitous now. This is kind of the feedback loop, and it shows as you're slowing down how the regenerative braking warms up and heats your battery and charges it while you're slowing down. And when you're being real delicate with the gas pedal, you know, you can kind of sip electricity and sip gas out of your car. And we always played this game in our house once we got our Prius to see who could get the best fuel efficiency as we're driving. It just kind of became fun. But this is kind of our introduction to you know, advanced technologies. Well, I was in already once this kind of happened. And then of course, 2012, 13, kind of the revolution happened, and EVs became available. And in 2015, I finally decided we would get a Model S. And so we have an electric vehicle now. Actually, I have three electric vehicles if you count this one on the right, which I just finished converting. This was a 1974 Volkswagen Carmen Ghia. I took the gas engine out, put electric motor in there, put some lithium ion batteries in there. And so that's been a fun project to work on over the past couple years, but that project's wrapping up now, but really exciting. The next kind of eye-opening experience that we had was we inherited a freezer from a family member who had passed. We decided, hey, we don't have a freezer in our garage, let's plug it in. And our power bills went through the roof. Didn't quite understand why. I purchased one of these energy monitors at one point, and discovered that our freezer was costing $25 per month just to run it. And Energy Trust of Oregon was kind enough to pay us $40 to just stop using it. They hauled it away for free, and we used like the $40 plus a couple months, and we bought a new freezer that's efficient and only costs like $1 a month to run. So that was kind of our next step into being a little more energy conscious. As part of getting this, we kind of started to discover what devices are using, how much consumption our refrigerator uses, so forth and so on. It allows us to monitor in real time what our house is consuming or generating. This is from a more recent screen capture, but this huge spike overnight is us charging one of our EVs. And so you can see that it charges and uses quite a bit of electricity. And then this yellow area here, it was actually a kind of a partly sunny day. We got some solar during the day, and so this kind of shows what we're able to look at in real time. That feedback is kind of an extension of that the Toyota Prius introduction, right? You had your Toyota Prius, you got that feedback loop. Now we had another feedback loop, and this was just all fueling my fire and kind of getting me more excited about renewables and ways to become more a better partner with our environment, I guess. Next thing we tried to do was we kind of tore out our grass. We put in a synthetic backyard with pavers, river rock. So what we got out of this was no fertilizer, no chemicals involved, low water. It looks good year round, and we use our backyard more. That's kind of exciting. Well, now that we're consuming more electricity, I think I don't have an exact percentage, but I think our EVs use maybe 40% of our total house consumption, maybe 50%. We decided that we realized we were actually adding additional load to the grid. So we felt somewhat, I don't know that irresponsible is the word. Fortunately, here in the Pacific Northwest, most of our utilities have a very good mixture of renewables versus non-renewable fuels, but most of them are very renewable, so I don't feel too guilty about it. But we decided we would go after and look at installing a solar powered system. We actually used, Zach shared that contact information from Energy Trust to kind of get you referrals. That was one of the ways that we went through and found a number of contractors to come and take a look at our house and give us some quotes and understood what we were getting into. We're only about 1.5 years in with our solar system. Last calendar year, 2019, we generated 9.3 megawatt hours of electricity. And to put this in terms you might understand or be a little more palatable, these are some of the comparators that might make this a little more realistic. 40,000 miles in a Tesla Model 3 with that electricity. So it's pretty neat. Well, and now we come to resilience. Decided to put some Tesla Powerwall batteries in at the house. We installed 2 Tesla Powerwalls. These are the Powerwall 2s. Each one is about 13.5 kilowatt hours of storage. For a total of 27, they can be cascaded together like Zach showed in some of his images. These are, the specs say that they're 92.5% efficient when you talk about the round trip of storing it and then discharging it to use it. And as Zach said, yes, this does power our solar PV system. It means that the grid is not needed anymore to run our solar. We have what's known as a partial home backup, like Zach talked about. The 2 things we chose not to back up were our electric vehicles and we chose not to back up our air conditioner. We figured we could suck it up a little bit in the summertime if it got too hot, but we're in Oregon, it doesn't get too hot. So those two things are, we decided weren't necessary for us. We also talked about a period of autonomy, and that's kind of weather dependent for us based on our home's electrical footprint and our consumption. We can actually achieve complete grid independence from March to September as long as the sun is in the sky, based on the amount of rain and cloud cover we have. But from March to September, we can be completely independent. Doesn't mean you can detach from the grid, because you still have to have somewhere to put your excess solar, and you want net metering to run if your batteries are full. But if the grid were to go down, we could sustain ourselves for an entire 6-month period, roughly. Over the winter, I estimate about 1 to 2 weeks of power. But I think what would happen if we had a catastrophic event over the winter months, I think we would probably change our behaviors a little bit, and maybe we wouldn't use as many resources. The next slide, I show some of the installation photos. So this is the guys showing up. They knocked this out in a day. They did put in a partial load panel. So I have a few of these. This is my basic panel. Put in a partial. Oh, this is a better picture here. This was my original panel. They basically put in this new essential loads panel and some gutter to route the electricity wires. And then I have this gateway that goes and attaches to the 2 power walls. Here they are all installed on the bottom. It's a really tidy installation, and we love having it there. But probably one of the most exciting things was our first power outage. You've seen the pictures. It's true. This was us during a power outage in November of 2019. Short of my day I got married, my kid's birth, this might have been one of the most exciting moments for me. We had it was about 9:30 p.m. We had a flash. It was the power kicked on, the batteries kicked in almost instantaneously. We didn't even notice, really. I looked over and said, did we just have a power outage? And we went and looked outside and saw some flashlights in all our neighbors' houses. And actually, you can see this window down here. You can see a flashlight in there. But I quick turned on all my lights and ran outside so I could take a picture because I thought it was too fun. So I'm living proof. Yes, this has happened, and we unwittingly became both the least popular people in our neighborhood and the most popular people in our neighborhood, because they all realized that, hey, in the event of an emergency, they can come over, and certainly you can charge your phone at our house, and we're happy to do that. And but that was kind of an unintended consequence, positive and negative. They hated us and they loved us all at the same time. But this was really a fun moment for us. Actually, that's the extent of the slides, Zach. So I know you said I had 10 minutes. I don't know quite how long I went, but I'm going to go ahead and turn it back to you.
Great.
Go for it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Patrick, for sharing that. That was awesome. And you're at 10 minutes on the dot. And I love that. I always, I've heard your story before, but I always like it. This is great. Hopefully that gives all of you some good kind of perspective, what it's like from when you have Selectio storage. And that's the end of our main content, and we are ready to move on to a very active Q&A channel. And I would love to introduce Lucas, who is our other panelist here. Lucas is a Solar Oregon board member. He has experience working in industry and is currently at Oregon Institute of Technology. In preparation for this event, Lucas was such a great technical resource and has some great deep knowledge. So I'm going to hand it over to Lucas to walk us through some of our Q&A. Oh, and you're on mute.
Good. Thanks. Thanks, Zach. Yeah, thanks, Zach. Thanks, Patrick. Those were both awesome presentations, as always. We do have quite a few questions here, so I'll try to get through them uh, fairly quickly. We may run a little bit past the 4 o'clock hour, so I just encourage everyone who's interested to stick around. And Patrick and Zach, if you have anything to add to any of these questions, please feel free to chime in.
Can I just put in for a second? And I just want to make a note to everybody that this presentation has been recorded and it'll be up on our YouTube channel. So if you want to come back and view it, you can do that too. Sorry.
Great. So if everyone wants to look at these questions too, you can click on that Q&A tab that Zach had outlined earlier in the presentation. It should be along the bottom bar of the video. And I'll just go in chronological order here. So we'll start with Rick, who asks, we have solar panels now, which are grid tied. We want to add storage. If we add batteries to the existing system, can we claim a federal tax credit, or must we do it in conjunction with adding more solar panels? According to a publication from NREL, it's likely we can. However, it's somewhat murky. NREL says to check with your tax consultant. My tax consultant says you're on your own on this one. So what do you think? So based on all of my experience, you should be able to apply the federal tax credit to any battery storage system that's tied into solar. That's really the main categorization that the federal government's looking for, is that it's tied to solar. So it shouldn't matter whether it's existing or it's a new system. They just want to be sure that it's a part of a renewable energy system. So if it's being charged from the grid, it wouldn't apply for the tax credit, but given that you're going to be tying this into a solar PV system, you shouldn't have any issues applying that tax credit. So moving on to the next one, I'll go to Gail, who asks, is there a rough estimate of the cost of the Howard Elementary School storage system? Also estimated time to do installation once permits are all achieved. This is a great question, and one that
We might have some connectivity issue here. Lucas, if you can hear us, your internet connection might be a little loose. That happens sometimes during these webinars. Oh, looks like you're back.
Okay. Where did I cut off, Zach?
Pretty much at the end of the question there, and that you don't know the exact answer.
Great. Okay. Yeah, so Gail's asking about a rough cost estimate for that elementary school storage system. It's really impossible to give an accurate estimate. Commercial projects vary on scope, size, equipment, timeline, jurisdiction. So it's really highly variable. I would encourage you to reach out to any contractors in your area if you are considering a commercial system, and they should be able to provide you with a free quote. And then scrolling down here, we have, if we have a standby generator with ATS, what is the behavior of the on-grid inverter? I'm guessing by this you mean ATS to be the automatic transfer switch, which basically acts as your backup power. So you have a generator on site that's standing by in the event of a grid outage. The automatic transfer switch will then turn on the generator and have that power the loads in your building. I can't speak to the technical details of that grid inverter. My assumption would just be that it's translating the DC power from your generator to AC, which is what your building loads would be used to. And again, I would encourage you, if you have technical specs that you're interested in, I would encourage you to reach out to the inverter manufacturer or an installer in your area. Lisa asks, what is the cost range for different storage options? Similar to Gail's question, I can't really give a specific answer here. It varies quite a bit based on where you live, how big your house is, how many loads you want backed up. if you have solar already and how big that solar array is. Just a ton of factors. And this is true with solar in general, is it's going to vary quite a bit based on your particular project. So I would reach out to installers in your area. They'll all be giving free quotes. So there's really no obligation, nothing tied to it. They're all comfortable just answering any questions you have over the phone. And if you provide your address and project details, they should be able to build you a pretty comprehensive quote for free. Dean asks, what percent is the state rebate? Let me add a link with more information on that rebate to the chat. It covers 40% of project costs for solar and up to $5,000, and then up to $2,500 for energy storage. But I'm pulling up a link here from the state website with a few more details and a Q&A. So that should be a good resource for you. And again, like most of these, if you have a specific project in mind, you should be able to get a quote from contractors in your area, no obligation, and they'll include the amount of that state refund, the investment tax credit, and any other local incentives that could apply to your project. Another anonymous attendee asks, are the tax credits refundable or non-refundable? If they're not refundable, then if you owe no taxes, low income, then you do not benefit. And this is a great question. The tax credits are non-refundable, so you can roll them over into the following year if you don't have much of a tax appetite that year, but they are non-refundable. And this is something to consider. If you don't have a large tax appetite, you won't be able to reap quite as much benefit from that specific incentive. You still will be able to apply the state rebate and the Energy Trust of Oregon rebate, but the federal tax credit won't apply to the same extent as it would for people who do have that larger tax appetite.
And I said the next question, those large current batteries, it's kind of like buying, I'll read it out. What is the efficiency of those large current batteries? I'm used to tiny off-grid systems in developing countries where lead acid or AGM batteries only have about 85% efficiency. I'm surprised you get 85% of lead acid, but no, that sounds about right. Kind of like buying a car, every different manufacturers, as there's more manufacturers, they're going to get more efficient, and the technology is getting better. I think I posted as part of my slides that the Tesla Powerwalls are 92.5% efficient round trip. So you lose about 3%, 3.5% on the charge and about 3.5% on the discharge. But they're certainly much better than what you've been used to.
All right, so moving on to the next question here, we have, is the cost of batteries coming down? Is the cost likely to come down more in the future? Short answer, yes. The cost has come down and we're likely to continue to drop as the technology improves and as we as installers get better at installing them. How much they'll go down, I can't say. And there is an opportunity cost to waiting. If waiting for prices to drop is something you're considering, I would encourage getting a quote and seeing what your payback would be and what the economic and environmental impacts would be of installing right now. Oftentimes it's better to go ahead and install sooner rather than waiting and hoping for prices to come down. It could be 5 years before things are significantly cheaper on the energy storage end of things, and solar is come down quite a bit, almost to the asymptote where it's about as cheap as it could be. There should be little fluctuations in solar.
And then I think Dean asked the next question. So how seamless has the Tesla Enphase interface been? My experience has been extremely seamless. It's just a quick flash. You barely even notice it. Definitely don't lose power to my devices when it switches over. So the power walls, as you know, create this kind of artificial grid, and the newer inverters, the micro inverters, are actually can tolerate a dynamic frequency, and so they know how much power to output to balance what your house is consuming, and so it's fully dynamic. And so I think that they've worked really well. Not all batteries have that ability to create this variable frequency load. Actually, Lucas, is it becoming kind of part of the requirements, like the IEEE requirements, or something now? I thought that all inverters moving forward had to have that feature. Do you know anything about that? You might still be on mute.
Yeah, I can't speak to specific updates that are coming, but it is something that's constantly being updated and improved upon. One of the benefits with a Tesla in particular is you do get some software updates. And this is something that a later question asks, is integrating a generator into your battery system, solar plus battery storage plus generator. Right now, if you were to purchase a Tesla Powerwall, it would not work for off-grid systems. Generators are producing DC power that in the industry, they call that dirty power. It needs to be cleaned in order to feed the battery system and then your house loads. But one of the perks with all these computerized battery systems is that a lot of them are offering software updates. So if you buy a Tesla Powerwall today, in a year or two, they'll still be sending you new software updates, and your product should continue to improve. And I think, so that partially answered, I guess, Pierre's question here on any options on integrating a generator into the solar plus storage. Again, that's for the Powerwall, and I believe most lithium-ion batteries on the market now. However, lead acid batteries tend to be preferred for off-grid applications. But as again, I would say reach out to a contractor in your area if you are considering integrating a generator into your system. They should be able to find equipment that will work for you. So Michael asks, V2H EV to house technology, using the vehicle battery as backup in case of power outage instead of a permanent dedicated battery like Tesla. With the complementary PV to vehicle direct charging, no grid dependence, that should be good resilience when you can't drive anywhere anyway. Yes, this is a really interesting concept that we unfortunately don't have in the US as of now for reasons above my pay grade, but I hope will be implemented in the near future. I know in Japan, they've started implementing this with Nissan Leafs. In essence, your EV battery is huge. It's in most cases enough to back up your whole home and certainly an essential loads panel. And your car tends to be where you are. So it really just makes sense to have this vehicle to home implemented. But unfortunately, that's not the case in the US right now. We're hopeful that things will change on that end in the coming years, but I don't believe you will be able to do anything like that, at least for the next few years. Next question is, what is the environmental cost of solar panels and batteries? How does that compare with the environmental benefit? Zach, do you want to take this one? I know this is a topic of interest for you.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a great question, and it's a great question to ask. And it's also a very hard question to answer comprehensively. And that's because with any product, there's so much that goes into analyzing what all of the environmental impacts are. I can tell you definitively that solar's environmental benefits are immense and far outweigh environmental cost. And especially when you're thinking of it, I mean, and this is how we typically think of solar, is it's a decarbonization technology, right? It's something that we are replacing fossil fuels. And at the same time, and you know, the difference there is just massive, partially because of climate impacts, partially because fossil fuels are just dirty and they cause a lot of health impacts. You know, the number of people, and I wish I had statistics that I could quote, but the number of people who die from respiratory disease just because of fossil fuel combustion each year is extraordinary. And that's an environmental cost of fossil fuels, and it's environmental and social cost of fossil fuels as well. And at the same time, you know, solar and batteries, they're physical products. And like anything that's a physical product that's manufactured where we're extracting materials out of the ground, whether that's silicon, whether that's lithium, there is environmental costs there in all extracted processes. And of course, there's you know, good ways to there's good industrial practice and there's poor industrial practice, right? And that's true in any industry. That's very much a true thing in fossil fuel industry and in clean energy industry. Really, at the end of the day, the environmental benefits and the social benefits of clean energy is just overwhelming. This is a huge topic that I'm very interested in, and I'm excited. Solar Oregon is exploring ways to increase programming to kind of look in and analyze, you know, what are the social environmental costs of solar, just like any technology, and the benefits there. So I wish I could give you like a definitive thing. The only thing I can tell you definitively is yes, the benefits outweigh the costs.
Great, thanks, Zach. So let's move to Eric, who asks thoughts on the future of things like the Quasar wall box and using your EV as battery backup. So I'm not familiar with Quasar wall box, but as we had mentioned before, using your EV as backup, it shows a lot of potential. On the surface, it makes a lot of sense, but it's not something that we have in the US right now. We're hopeful that it becomes a viable option here in the near future. Next, on-grid inverter versus hybrid inverter, please advise. I hate to say it again, but I would check with a contractor. A lot of these questions depend on site factors that they're going to be able to give you specific information like this based on your project scope. I can't really give general guidance on which one would be preferable without knowing a lot more information. So I would recommend, again, reaching out to a local contractor who should be able to give you a free bid. Next up, we have, can we use a lithium battery for home application as a backup? Yes, lithium ion batteries, such as the Tesla Powerwall, are super common for residential and commercial applications, and seem to be growing in popularity pretty quickly. Jean asks, what is the advantage to microinverters versus a large inverter? This is a great question. For a lot of residential applications, microinverters make the most sense. So I guess taking a step back, a microinverter is attached to the underside of each panel to invert the DC output of that solar panel to AC immediately, versus a larger inverter will collect the power from a string of modules that's in DC and convert that entire string into AC. So for a smaller system, like you would normally see in a residential home, microinverters tend to be cheaper, and they also provide a slight efficiency boost. But for a larger system, like in a commercial application, you wouldn't necessarily want to pay for that many microinverters, and the efficiency boost is somewhat negligible when there are alternate options on the market for a larger system. So in that scenario, a large inverter tends to make the most sense. Okay, we got 2 left here. This question is...
I'll jump in on this one. So related to that Sense device, the benefit from installing it is kind of there's a couple of ways that it works, but it will create actually a device signature for, is getting a little technical here, but it'll actually start detecting heating sources or generators or other different consumers in your house. And so compressor will be detected. It'll actually detect your EV charging, and it'll create a device profile and says, oh, you've used your refrigerator and it's cost you X amount of dollars to run this month. Another thing you can do is you can just turn on a light switch and look at the app and see exactly how much it's using. So you think about LED lights in your kitchen versus incandescent bulbs. You can literally see the impact of that before you switch over, and I find that was pretty exciting. But over in the chat window, I went ahead and added a link to Sense. There are other options as well. I don't work for Sense. This is just a hobby. There are other options. I think Nurio is another management tool or a monitoring tool. But go ahead and check out those links that I put on the chat window.
Patrick, that was just for folks' context. That was in reference to the Sense box. So if you remember Patrick's slide where he had the great colorful graph, and I was talking about his refrigerator, and yeah, that's what that was, which is great.
So I think that was the last question we had. So I'll throw it back to you, Zach, if you have any closing messages.
Great. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. This is such an exciting topic for us. Energy resilience obviously is a big thing to think about in Oregon and everywhere. And I love how much interaction we get on these webinars. Thank you for putting in the chat and all the Q&A questions. We will have webinars throughout the summer, and hopefully you're not getting burnt out on webinars, but we're excited to keep exploring some great topics with you all. Thank you so much to Patrick for joining us and sharing his story. That just adds so much richness to the event. And Lucas, thank you so much. You, again, were a great technical resource for me to learn about batteries in preparation for this event. And thank you for being here to provide your technical expertise. We, again, will have this out on our YouTube channel. Take a look for it. And if you want to share, if you have solar plus storage and you want to share your solar plus storage story as part of our community, kind of like Patrick has today, please reach out to me, info@solaroregon.org, and we love to incorporate new voices into the community too. So thank you again so much, and we will see you next time.